Okay, hi everyone. I'm Janine Grafton from RiverSea Gallery in Astoria, and I'm so pleased to present our fourth solo show of work by Leslie Peterson Sapp. We've been showing her artwork here since 2011, and it's been interesting to watch her evolve over the years. What originally drew me to her work was her use of vintage photographs, snapshots for inspiration. And Leslie would go through hundreds upon hundreds of photographs, and being Leslie, she was looking for composition, but the resulting artwork invariably was imbued with history, story, relationships, family memories. And one thing she did that was really interesting was she painted in acrylic on plywood panel, and she would let the grain of the wood show through. It became part of the painting, part of the composition, and really had an effect. And then in 2016, her work went through really a dramatic transformation when she became fascinated with American film noir. And not only did she change stylistically and thematically, but she also had a new choice of medium, which was collage. And so as a thing to witness, and we've been showing that ever since. I think I'll just turn you over to Leslie to learn about how she does that.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Janine, and thanks for this marvelous opportunity. Can everybody hear me? Yes? Okay, great. Okay. Well, how things are going to go is that first I'm going to show a little video. I'm going to talk about film noir a little bit and why I like it. And then I'm going to be showing a slideshow. And the slideshow will have images of my art. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how I develop an image from the original source to the end. And then we're going to be opening up the room for some questions. And first, I'm going to be answering some questions that Janine has for me that she's gotten from people who've seen the show. And then we'll open up the room. And as the time goes on, if you do have questions, feel free to put it in the chat down below at the bottom of the screen, because I have my lovely assistant, Bridget Benton. She is going to be collecting those questions and reading them to me at the end. And but if you don't want to use the chat, then we'll also have an opportunity for you to like wave your arms around, and you can and I can unmute you, and you can ask me verbally if that's what you prefer, but that'll be near the end. Okay? So, all right, let's get started. A long time ago, a friend of mine said to me that romance is not about being fulfilled. It is about longing. Longing. Mystery. Suspense. Connection and alienation. Solitude. Danger. Glamour, adventure, sex, obsession, power, illicit liaisons, secret meetings, tragic beauty, and drama. These are words that describe film noir, and they're also words that could be used to describe my work in this show, Story Without a Plot. What is film noir? Well, film noir is a style. It's a style of filmmaking that had its heyday in the 1940s and 50s, but the term film noir was not coined until a little bit later in 1946. It was influenced by German Expressionism. And German Expressionism was an art genre that was popular or developed in Germany between the two world wars, and it involved, you know, like theater and painting and filmmaking too. And a lot of this art was very challenging, and they were labeled degenerates by the Nazis, and they were ousted, or that their lives became unsafe, and so if they could leave, they did leave, and a lot of them did come to the United States, and they were given jobs in Hollywood. And the jobs they were generally given were to do these kind of hard-boiled crime dramas. If you remember in the 1930s with like Edward G. Robinson and James Cagney, you know, like Public Enemy and stuff like that, there's all these like hard-boiled like crime dramas and things like that, and they were like put into they were not considered very important films, and so these immigrants were put into those films, but these immigrants were great artists who were like you know, had a great deal of skill, and so they just applied their skill. And so at the time, these films were not considered to be very important, but in retrospect, they became considered that way and really valued for what they were, how they were created. Some of the qualities of film noir are dramatic lighting, deep shadows, extreme camera angles, deep focus, and something that we call chiaroscuro, which means sort of emerging out of the darkness. And the stories have got elements of eroticism and cruelty and adventure, damaged people with cynical attitudes, unlikely heroes, plot twists, lots of moral ambiguity and fatalism. These are all things that, I mean, I don't consider myself to be a cynical, cruel, or broken or particularly dark person. But there was a time in my life when I was younger when I did feel like I was misunderstood and that I didn't fit in. And I did also suffer quite a bit from unrequited romantic desires and things like that. And so even though now in my life I do feel like, you know, I'm in a good place, I'm in a good stable place, and I'm much happier now, but there's still a part of me that still has that inside of me. And so I think that this is almost like catharsis. And I think a lot of people are like that, people who like romance novels or action movies or something like that. They don't necessarily want to have like a dark, confusing life themselves or a lot of romantic drama, but they still like to engage in it. So you might say that I sort of live vicariously through my own artwork. And when people see my art, they're usually very, very intrigued by the story, the narrative, and they want to know what is going on with the characters. And they ask me questions, what's going on with this and why is it like that? But little do they know that it is a story without a plot, which is where I came up with this title. There really is no story. And so I like to think of it as like, you know, those cooking shows on TV where they have competitions and they give like certain ingredients to these people, and then these people have to like create a meal out of it as part of human nature, right? So I throw elements in, I put a man, I put a woman or two people, and I put them in a room with like the moon or a ship or a car or something like that. And there's a story that gets created, and I just love that. And I really delight in hearing people's stories about what they think is going on. And I also find that people, when they can identify with somebody in the painting, that's really when it makes them intrigued and like that. So, okay, so I'm going to start my screen share again, and I'm going to share with you some of my technique. Everybody see that? Yeah, okay, good. Story without a plot. Technique, cool. So first thing that happens is I paint a lot of paper. The reason why I like collage is because it really forces me to not get caught up in the particulars, which is something that I used to suffer from quite a bit. But it forces me to simplify shapes, and it also makes me far more conscientious of color choices. And as you can see, this is all variations on the same color, and these are all things that I tried before finding exactly the thing that I wanted. So my color choices have become far more particular because of the collage. This is a shot of my work table. As you can see, it gets pretty complicated. Can you see my cursor when I move it around? Yeah, okay. This is something that I use to glue down the paper. This is the razor blades that I use. I very rarely use X-Acto blades, once in a while, but not very much. And I use golden heavy gel as a glue. And when I'm done with a piece, I will gather up all these little shards of paper into bundles of like colors and store them and use them for the next time. Developing an image. Okay, so Egress and Backlight are two different images, but they're based on the same source. This is Nightmare Alley from 1947. And this was a picture that I took of the television set. As you can see, I've left the that subtitles on somehow. I don't know how that happened, but so there they are. So this is just a great picture. I mean, this guy and the doors open and his shadow, and she's standing there with this look on her face. I just love it. So I did a little small drawing here, and then I did a very small miniature, which is something that I do oftentimes, not all the times, to further simplify the shapes, because you just cannot get caught up when, you know, in detail when it's only 3 inches by 4 inches. And I may have made a second one with this too, I'm not sure. And then here's the first version. This is called Egress. It's 16 by 20. And this is commercially produced paper that is used for scrapbooking. This is something I use quite a bit because it's acid free and it's just really great stuff. And here you can see the wood grain here. This is done from a very simple crafting tool that you get at Home Depot or Michael's Crafts or something like that. And it's just this little tool that you can use to create faux wood finish. And I do that on paper really frequently and use that a lot. Here's the large version. As you can see, it's quite large. It's 36 by 48. And this is origami paper. Here's more of the wood grain paper. And it's just another version with a slightly different colors, different emphasis. At the last minute, I decided to put in this reflection as if there's a mirror on the wall. That was really fun. I like that. But then like a year later, or a year or two later, I just still wasn't quite done with this image. It was still kind of in my head. And so this time though, I decided to pose for myself. And you'll see that I do this quite a bit. This here is a light stand with a piece of fabric thrown over it. And it's at the height of me. And this is so that I know where to stand when I do the other figure. Otherwise, the scale, you just wouldn't know like exactly where I'm supposed to be standing. So there's this, and then I made this backlight. And this one's a little bit unusual because it's all acrylic. There are no collage elements on this at all. So it's different. Many a moon. Okay, these are a collection of different pieces that I've done where I have posed myself in my own photographs quite a bit. So I just want to show you a little bit about that. I mean, I have hundreds of photographs of myself, and here's just a little collection of them. And Janine, I see Janine is laughing. And so sometimes when I need inspiration, I'll just go back into my file folders with all these pictures, and I will just kind of look around in them and say, oh, what could I do? So I just decided these two things really would fit well together. So I made a really small sketch. This is probably 5 inches by 5 inches. And then I went ahead and made a miniature, those almost 6 by 6, not quite, that's in the show right now. And then here's the final result. And one thing I should point out too is that Janine mentioned that I used to have the wood grain show all the time. And I like having a ground that is exposed as much as possible. I'm not sure why. I think it unifies the piece and maybe simplifies the piece. So all of this here, all of this is the ground. I take my panel, my wood panel, I painted it all the same color and left it exposed as much as possible. That just excites me. I'm not sure why. Vacancy. This one's a real favorite of people's. And this one was a little different because I didn't get this one from an exact source. It's not like I saw the image someplace, but I think this is a famous movie called Detour. And I think that in the back of my mind, I was inspired by this scene in Detour. And so this tiny sketch came into my sketchbook, God, several years ago. But it was just one of those things that just I couldn't quite get out of my mind. And so I decided to flesh it out by taking pictures of myself. So here I am again in my bedroom. You see the striped underpants. Yeah, right. And so one of the things that's interesting is that, you know, cameras are really good at capturing detail, but they really don't see the same way that people do. And so there's a lot of camera distortion. And so you see with this, if I had just used the photograph just straight, my legs would be like very stumpy and just kind of truncated and doesn't look right. So I did another photograph just of my legs with the camera down low so that I could get that accurate, or just more accurate. And then here's the more complex sketch for it. And I've had enough artists like anatomy and things like that to be able to identify, you know, this is the cranium, this is the back of the skull. You know, these are the shoulder blades, the spine. Here's the pelvis. So I'm not great at it, but I'm pretty good at it, at just drawing the figure. This is a series of my sketchbook, just working out the details. You see the thumbnail sketches here. Here I'm getting closer to what I want behind it. This is a really detailed area of what I want behind it. And I actually think that I did take a picture of this, put it in Photoshop, expanded it or contracted it, and just traced it. I do that quite a bit, where I'll take my initial drawing and put it to size through a Photoshop program, just, you know, put it out on the printer and then use a transfer paper just to get that real accurately. And here I am working out the sign, which had to change because this thing just wasn't going to work out. It just wasn't going to be realistic looking, so I had to change the sign. Here's the aquatint that I created from that image. And that was really fun. I really like the just the stark contrast of the values, the darks and lights. And then here is the final piece, which, as you can see, is kind of large. It's 48 by 40. And the only aspect of this that is collaged is the dress. And again, the dress comes from scrapbooking paper. And it just really, that's another thing. I bought it years ago and I just couldn't get it out of my mind. And like, one of these days, I got to use that stuff in a dress. Glass houses, this is the last one. I was really inspired by this graphic novel artist named Richard Stark. He is amazing because all he's working with is black, white, and one color. And these images, as you can see, are incredibly complex. This, look at that. This is all just black, white, and blue. That's it. And I was just thinking, gosh, I wish I could do that. So I decided to try it. Oh, and the other thing is that those of you who know me know that I love a really good martini. And so I thought, isn't it strange that here I have all this artwork and I don't have any martinis in them at all, you know, and you associate martinis with kind of like film noir and in that era and stuff like that. So I thought, oh, I should just, you know, so I just went on the internet and I just grabbed this off the internet and I put it through my Photoshop. This is very different because I didn't do any of the development, or very little development. And I just put it through my Photoshop thing. I'm not good at Photoshop, but I'm very poor at it, but I was able to just flatten it, make it black and white, make it contrast, and then loop in some stuff and just black them out and see, gee, what'd that look like? And then I decided to make a couple of little sketches. But again, they're real different because they're loose. They're just done with ink brush pens with black, white, and one color. But then I just went ahead and instead of doing all that preparatory stuff, I just started drawing right on the picture, right on the thing, and I came up with this. And this is sort of the thing in progress. This is me testing different colors, and you can see stuff isn't quite glued down. And then this is the result, the final result. And all of this is collage except for here is some watercolor, which is also unusual for me, directly on gessoed panel. All right, so that is that. Okay, so now I think I'm ready to give some questions. And so let me unmute you, Janine. Can you unmute? I think you might have to unmute yourself.
I think I just did.
Okay.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, one of the questions that, or one thing I'd like you to talk about is you had a major transition when you moved to collage. And so could you talk about that process? Like what made you go from painting the way you were to using collage so strongly in your work?
Well, you may remember that my last, no, let's see, I had a show with you in 2013 and it was literally like a week before I got married. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Just a crazy time. It was just crazy time. And, you know, to be honest with you, I really loved doing the snapshots, but they were ultimately a little limiting for me. And I just felt like, I wanted to just infuse more drama and more imagination into my work. And also the wood grain kind of made it so that my palette was very, very limited. And I just kind of felt like it was being confining. So I actually went through a pretty long period of time just going back to the basics and taking classes again and just trying to remember, like, what's it like to just draw and to just paint from life and to just really getting back to the basics. And in that time, I took some classes from an artist that I really admire called Mark Andres, and he made us do collage. He made us reproduce famous paintings using collage. And the results I found when I did that was just so enlivening that I decided to keep doing it. And then I've always been sort of enjoying movies and working from movie imagery, but I'm trying to remember how I got to the film noir. He may have given us an assignment for working from a movie. I can't remember, but it's not the first time I've worked from movies. I've done that before. Yeah.
Do you have some sort of familial connection to the heyday of Hollywood, or like something that drew you to film noir in your personal or family life? Or is it a movie obsession, or What about a costume collection?
I have been known to wear costumes, that's for sure. My friend Bridget can attest to that. My goodness. I have been known to wear a few costumes, but you know, I have no familial connection to the movie industry or anything like that. And I like movies, but I couldn't even really describe myself as a movie addict. I think that, you know, I've been always attracted to that era. So even when I was doing the snapshots, it was the same era. You remember? I mean, it was usually, you know, the 20s through the 50s or 60s. But I think, so the noir enabled me to still interact with that style, but it really lent itself for more drama. And also, to be honest with you, a lot of it is because I am literally learning from the cinematographers. You know, like they were great artists and they knew how to frame a great composition. And so I was attracted to that too. So it's a combination of things. It's the styling. And also there's something about the being able to look at the world through the lens of the past is something that really interests me. I think looking at today's values and say the gender roles or something like that, but you're looking at it through what used to be, is something that really I just find very fascinating, and I like to explore.
So one of these paintings in the show, Backlight, is without any collage. It's all acrylic painting. Is that a harbinger of something to come here? Have you come full circle, and where's your work heading next?
Well, let's see. I think that one of the things that I'm trying to allow myself to do is to just let myself use the materials and the techniques that work for each individual piece. I used to kind of do this thing where I felt like once I landed on a methodology, I had to just do that all the time. I'm not sure why. I think I was concerned about being inconsistent or something like that. So I'm really trying to allow myself to just be, you know, like if it just needs to be all acrylic, then it needs to be all acrylic. If it needs to have a bunch of preparatory studies, do that. And if it needs to be more spontaneous, do that. But a harbinger for things to come, probably not. I mean, I think the thing that I'm really thinking about in the future is becoming more involved with the printmaking, especially the woodcut, and making the shapes and even more simple. Part of what I really liked about glass houses was that the skin was not skin color. Like I had this compulsion to make all my skin some sort of shade of yellow, pink, brown, maybe with purpley shadows, and I don't want to be constrained by that anymore. So I would say that glass houses is more the direction that I'm going to be going, and woodcut. Okay. Do you have any more questions, Janine?
That's what I have. I would like to hear what other people have to say, though.
Okay. I'm going to unmute people. Bridget, is there?
Well, so far, not a lot of activity in the chat, but Margaret Bremner did have a few comments on Backlight. She thought that version 2 might have the woman in the doorway and the man in the room, which I know when I first saw that series of photographs that you had done, that might be a direction that you took it. Is that an image that you think you might work with again? And what do you think would shift if you reverse the genders?
That would be very interesting. Yeah, I had never thought about that. I had not thought about that. Yeah, that is very interesting.
Okay, the other thing, she just mentioned that in Many a Moon, she loves the blue window corner with the moon in the mirror in that final version.
Great. That's great. Yeah, you know, that was a real like last minute thing. It really was. it was like, because if you notice in the small version, it doesn't have that. But in the final version, I just like went, you know, yeah, I'm going to have like this spot of blue. So that was different. Yeah.
So I was intrigued by, here we go, from Beth Kirshen. Is the design or fashion style also something that you like about the noir theme?
Yeah. Yeah. You know,
Yeah.
yeah. The clothes back then were not as comfortable, but they were certainly very flattering. You know, I mean, everybody looked great back then. I mean, you know.
Those shoes, the shoes are just, yeah, flattering to anyone. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think the styling of everything, you know, like the architecture, the jewelry, the graphics, the advertisements, the fonts, the clothing, that's all stuff that I just love from that time. And so I love integrating that into my work.
And do you and your husband watch older films? I mean, it would never occur to me kind of independently to explore this kind of noir film. And I just wondered, do the two of you do you watch older movies together? Is that something that's a part of something that you do that might have also given you access to some of these images?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah, we enjoy that. Turner Classic Movies is something that we commonly, isn't that great? It's such a great, I hope it never changes. It's so great. Somebody I can see in the thing says, do you have a favorite movie? Yes, I do. It's Vertigo. Vertigo. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I would love to do if I could figure out the licensing someday in the future is maybe do a whole show based on Vertigo. Jeez, like, yeah. I mean, can you imagine that?
Wow.
You know, but I think that in order to do that, I'd have to have a better understanding of licensing and copyright things or something like that. Because if I were to do that, I would want to plug it as such. I would want to be all like, this is artwork based on Vertigo. And so anyway, I don't know. So that's sometime in the future. So yeah. So yes, that is my favorite movie. And that is a movie filled with longing. Lots of longing. Yeah.
Does anyone else, I have another question because I'm just full of questions, but does anybody else have anything that's percolating as they're listening to Leslie talk?
You can wave your arms around if you have a question, or if you don't, you can say something in the chat.
Here's a comment. I just want to say that since we've been showing her film noir artwork, we have a lot of visitors to the gallery that try to guess the films they come from. And some people just know. They'll go, oh, that's a scene from such and such.
Oh, really? Well, that's interesting. You know, because I did do that at first. When I first started doing film noir, I really would take something and lift it right out of a movie. But now I don't do that anymore.
Right. It hasn't happened so much with the newer work. People are still trying to guess, but we used to have people that would.
They knew.
Yeah.
Yeah. I stopped doing that.
So in the comments, Margaret Bremner says, maybe you could do artwork inspired by rather than based on Vertigo. And then Aaliyah says, I admire all the research that goes into each piece, all the sketches and photos, etc. But do you feel married to those plans? And does it keep you from being spontaneous or changing your mind?
Sometimes yes and sometimes no. I mean, I do feel that sometimes, you know, I'll tell you, I think that a lot of that spontaneity is done in the sketches, because the sketches, part of the reason why I do so many of them is because they move and move and move and move and move and move, and it's very fluid during that time. And then once I kind of get the image down, my desire is to move that forward and to develop it to the extent that, you know, to its end, to its best conclusion. And it becomes a lot less fluid. Once in a while I will totally change it, like, and somebody else mentioned that little blue window in Many a Moon, you know, that was a very spontaneous thing at the end. I was like, bam, you know, just hit this thing really hard right there. But sometimes I do get a little, feel a little constricted, but this is one of the areas in my life when it's a dance between control and spontaneity. And I kind of like the discipline. And I like knowing what I'm going to do. Like sometimes my friend Bridget here, she is an encaustic artist, and she and her friends will talk about like, oh, I just love the fact that you just never know what's going to happen. And I'm like, it sounds like a nightmare to me.
Yes, Leslie and I have very, very different creative styles.
Yeah, really, you can't control it. You can't control it. What am I doing? You know, so it's just, you know, but sometimes I do feel like I wish I had more spontaneity, but a lot of the time I don't. A lot of the time I just really like having the control. Yeah.
So that's actually one of the things that I love about the smaller collages.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a couple of those in my collection. And they have a little bit more of that spontaneity. And then the larger works feel more solid, more grounded. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was curious, you mentioned longing. Again, you and I have known each other as artists for a very long time. And when you said that, it just really struck me because it began to almost tie in as like a spine or a thread that runs through the entire history of your work. Mm. And, you know, Janine was talking earlier about working with those snapshots. And I know some of the snapshots you were drawn to because of composition. Other ones, I'm wondering, was there an element of longing that also showed up in terms of the snapshots you were drawn to?
Well, I think that anytime you're dealing with images of the past, there's a certain wistfulness that is connected to them. And so it's almost like a longing for a past that perhaps never existed, or, you know, there's something almost intrinsically fantasy driven around being intrigued with the past. And so there is something about that word longing. And I think we all have longing. So I don't know if I'm answering your question very well. But
I think even the way you're sort of holding your body was answering that. You know, it tapped into something. And Beth Kirshen said nostalgia.
Yeah.
Which I think is almost a sense of longing for a past that never was.
Yeah.
Which you described that exactly.
Yeah.
Bobby Stefan has a question. I love the Noir series. How long does it take to create a piece, and when do you decide it's done?
Oh, that's a good question. How long does it take to make a piece? Forever. It takes forever. These things take a long time. They really do. But you know, but then again, it's extremely, I mean, that was kind of tongue in cheek. That's the way it feels sometimes. You know, truthfully, sometimes it takes a week or two. And then there are other times when it takes a very long time for some reason or another. Some of them, if I can't quite get something right, it'll take weeks and weeks. You know, like the Bitter Sea 2 that is hanging up in there. The woman that is like looking over her shoulder at the, you know, she's got a scarf on. I couldn't get her face right. I couldn't, and it just kept going and going and going and going. And it was, and then some are just, you know, fairly quick. So, you know, like Urgent behind Janine there, it didn't take that long. It's a simple image, and it was a well-conceived image. Like it just, like I could just see it in my mind. Like in my mind's eye, I was just like, this is what has to happen. And so the execution of it was fairly simple. However, I will say that the collage is a very labor-intensive technique that takes a long time to do. And then when I'm done with it, I have to go through it like this at an angle, making sure all the little pieces are glued down and that they're not bubbling and warping, and, you know, and then I have to varnish, you know, so it's a very labor-intensive thing. Yeah, especially the big ones. And how do I know that they're done? I don't know. I actually think that if I had a more spontaneous technique, that would be a more, maybe a question that I had that would be more involved. But as it is, because I have a conceptual idea from the initial, from the front end, then it's pretty easy for me to know when it's done. Yeah.
You have a clear goal in mind, and then when you've achieved it and it feels right.
Although, you know, sometimes I go back to things. I don't know if you, recently I just even put something on Facebook where it was like a poll, like, do you want, it was a piece that was supposed to be done. It was called Pursuit. It was a really long, skinny one like this. And in one version, there was a man in a doorway silhouetted, and in another one, I took Photoshop and just kind of crudely took it out. And I was like, well, which should it be? You know, and I actually took a poll and had people like vote on which one they liked better. Thank God they wanted me to keep it in, because that way I didn't have to but you know, so sometimes I'll come back, and I think that honestly, that's one of the reasons, actually this is part of the thing. That is part of the reason why I do things over and over and over again, rather than working on it and then not feeling done. I will do it and it will feel done. And then when it's done, I'll go, but that's not done. And so I'll do it again. Does that make, you know, and I'll keep doing versions of it until it feels like it's done. Does that, you know, so there's a different version of that, I think, for me.
Because I've known you to work with a single image, and you showed that today, that working with a single image in multiple media, reworking the image several times over the course of years.
Yeah, over years. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Sometimes they look very much alike, and sometimes they're wildly different. Just depends. Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, Leslie, I put a question on.
Oh, you did?
I am not on video.
Awesome.
So let me get back to it. Okay, I should be coming up. Hi.
Hi.
So I did ask a question. It's the last question in your chat box.
I'm so sorry, I didn't see it, and I'm so glad that you spoke up. What is it that you'd like to ask? Where is this?
I asked if you are what I would call a discipline artist. You have a regular schedule. You're in your studio. You're working, or do you not as disciplined? Like in the studio at 8, you're out by 5. And then my other question was, do you, because you work large and you've got small sketches and you've got big sketches. So do you work out of a sketchbook, like a manufactured sketchbook, or do you work on sheets of paper and those are your sketches?
Yeah, you know, that's a good question, because and I'm looking around for it, I don't see it. But okay, so I used to work more on loose sheets of paper, Linda, and then sometimes I'll put them into file folders. Believe me, I don't have a filing system, but I'll just keep them, like I've got like one of those expanded, remember those brown expanded office things that you could do with I just stick them in there. But I'm trying to discipline myself to have a nice hardbound book. And you saw some of those sketches. I'm trying to do that because I saw somebody at a show, and I wanted to do it at this show, Janine, but I just thought, you know, with COVID, the last thing we need is have people getting their like COVID-laden hands all over, you know what I mean? You can't do that right now, right? You can't have people handling an object, you know, so sometime in the future, when I have a show, I would really love to just have it there and have people be able to just like look through it. And so that's why I'm trying to kind of train myself into, like, you know, and if I have a piece of something that that is a loose piece of paper, sometimes I'll literally just glue it in there. You know what I mean? I'll just glue it right on the pages. And so I'm trying to, you know, that's like something I'm experimenting with and have been for like the last year. And I've really liked the results, but it's hard to remember to, you know, keep doing it. You see what I'm saying? And then what was the other question? You said,
she asked about whether you as an artist have a disciplined routine.
Fairly disciplined.
Routine. Yeah. Are we going to see her calendar?
Fairly disciplined. So I usually, you know, I keep track of my hours.
Wow.
Just so that but it's more like in the after, like, but I try to be pretty disciplined. And, you know, get in here, usually start around 10, and I leave either by 3 or 5. And that's usually what my hours are. And I try to group my, you know, if I have to do errands or do socializing or something like that, I try to put that in the same day. Like, so I know, like, Monday I'm not working in the art studio at all because I'm going to do all these other things. You see what I mean? I try to, like, loop them together because I know that transitioning from doing artwork to not doing artwork or vice versa is really hard. You know what I mean? It's really hard. So I try to make it so that if I've started in it, and only that I forget, like, once I start doing artwork, I completely forget about everything else. Or if I'm doing something else, I completely forget about my artwork. So I try to train it and make it so that I've got blocks of time. Is that, yeah, thanks. Okay, anybody else? If you think of anything else that you want to ask or interact with me, you can either contact me through RiverSea Gallery with Janine, or through my website, or through my Facebook page, my Instagram, Leslie Peterson Sapp. Yep, that's me. I want to thank Janine so much for such a wonderful relationship that we've had for all these years, and thank you for providing me with the show. Thank you.
I have to thank you. The pleasure's all ours.
And thank you, Bridget, for being my little helper. You're the best.
That was really great, Leslie. I feel privileged to be part of this.
Thank you, Janine. I feel privileged to be a part of your gallery. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good rest of your evening. Bye.
Thank you.